I was standing in front of the biggest moment of my life when my phone buzzed with the kind of message that rearranges your insides. My name is Maya Collins. I'm 30 years old, and that morning in Savannah, Georgia, I was about to open my very first interior design studio, the thing I had worked toward since I was old enough to rearrange my childhood bedroom and pretend it was a magazine spread. Maya Design & Co. My name, big, bold, glowing above the glass door. A crowd of local clients, neighbors, and friends waited outside, smiling, chatting, cameras ready to capture the ribbon cutting. It should have been the moment I finally exhaled. But then the message came. It was from my parents. Short, cold, effortless in the worst way. We can't make it. We're in New York for Ethan's architecture showcase. Don't expect us home until next week. My hand froze around the handle of the ceremonial scissors. Ethan, of course. My younger brother, 4 years younger, 400 times more celebrated, was once again the center of their universe. Even on a day I thought maybe, just maybe, they would show up for me. I swallowed hard, blinking fast so my tears wouldn't embarrass me in public. People were watching, some waving, some already taking photos. I forced my shoulders back, hoping my face wasn't giving away the feeling that I'd just been punched behind my ribs. I mailed my parents handwritten invitations, real ones, not texts, not emails. I described the studio, how long I dreamed of it, how much it would mean if they came. I even imagined the moment my mom would hug me and say she was proud, something I had replayed in my head for years like a scene from a movie that never premiered. Instead, I got replaced again, effortlessly, casually, almost like I should have expected it. I felt something inside me crack. Not dramatically, just quietly, like a seam that couldn't hold anymore. The bakery owner across the street waved at me, motioning that people were ready for the ribbon cutting. Chloe, my best friend, mouthed, "You got this," from the crowd. And for a moment, I almost let the pain swallow me whole. Almost. But instead, I straightened my spine, took a breath that trembled in my chest, and stepped forward like I had nothing to lose. Before the scissors touched the ribbon, I heard myself speak the kind of words that came from a place I didn't even know had grown inside me. If you've ever felt like the backup child in your own family, I want you to share your story in the comments. We're building a space where people like us don't stay silent anymore. People clapped softly. A few nodded like they understood exactly what that meant. I continued, voice steadier now. And before I tell you the whole story of how I ended up here, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, and let's make sure this reaches someone who needs it. The crowd leaned in, curious. The cameras rolled, and I let the bitterness burn clean through me, leaving something sharper behind. When the ribbon parted with a crisp snap, the cheers rose around me, but I barely heard any of it. All I could think was how years and years of being overlooked had led me right to this moment. I had prayed for their presence. I had begged for their attention. I had tried to earn their love like it was something you win if you work hard enough. But that text, that careless dismissal, did something to me. Something final. As the crowd flooded the studio, I whispered to myself, if they chose Ethan again, then today I choose me. And that's where this story really begins. If you really want to understand why that text from my parents hit so hard, you have to understand where it all began. My childhood wasn't tragic in the obvious ways. There was no screaming, no broken plates, no dramatic scenes from a movie. Instead, it was the quieter kind of hurt. the kind that settles in your bones because it repeats day after day until you start believing you deserve it. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, in a beige two-story house where everything looked perfect on the outside. The lawn was trimmed, the living room smelled like lemon cleaner, and my parents made sure the Christmas cards looked picture-perfect every year. But picture-perfect families don't always feel perfect on the inside. My mom, Linda Collins, was a high school English teacher, strict, organized, always busy. My dad, Robert, ran a contracting company and spent half his life on construction sites. And then there was Ethan, my younger brother, who could build a miniature city out of popsicle sticks and have our parents reacting like he'd just invented electricity. He was the prodigy. I was the helpful one, and those labels stuck. I remember being 9 years old, hunched over the dining table, making a mosaic out of recycled bottle caps for an art competition. I was so proud. It was messy and colorful, full of little pieces I'd spent hours gluing into place. My parents didn't come to the competition. They were at one of Ethan's first architecture camps. He was 10. Mrs. Harlow, our elderly neighbor, the one who baked too many pies, was the only person who showed up for me. She clapped like I had just rewritten the Constitution. And for a moment, I believed that mattered. But that night at dinner, when I told my parents I'd gotten 3rd place, my mom just said, "That's nice, honey," before turning to Ethan and asking him all about the new bridge model he was designing at camp. That was the first time I felt myself shrink inside my own skin. And it didn't stop there. In middle school, I signed up to help decorate the school library. We were repainting, reorganizing, turning it into something that felt warm and creative. I was proud of it. I stayed late so many afternoons that the librarian started saving snacks for me. When I invited my parents to the reveal day, they didn't come. Ethan had a robotics showcase 2 towns over. Every milestone of his was a family event. Every milestone of mine was something I kept inside my backpack until it crumpled. By the time I was a teenager, I'd stopped expecting them to show up. There was one moment, one that still sits in my chest like a stone. When I was 15, I spent 2 weeks redesigning our living room as part of a school project. I created mood boards, rearranged furniture, even repurposed one of Dad's old toolboxes into a coffee table centerpiece. I was so excited to show them. Mom walked in, glanced around, said it looks cute, then immediately asked Ethan how his new CAD software was working. I remember standing there, hands still covered in tiny glue dots, feeling my heart sink through the floor. Cute was the kind of word people used when they weren't paying attention. But the moment that shaped me the most came a year later. I was 16, walking home from school with a folder of sketches from an assignment where my teacher had written, "You have a designer's eye." I got home and overheard my mom on the phone bragging to a coworker, "We're putting so much money into Ethan's summer program. He's really gifted, you know?" My heart lifted for a second. Maybe she'd say something about me. Just one sentence, just one moment of, "Maya's talented too." But she didn't. She never did. Later that night, I asked if she could help cover part of the cost for a beginner design workshop I desperately wanted to take. She didn't even look up from her grading. "Honey, we can't pay for every hobby. Maybe stick to something simpler." 3 days later, Dad bought Ethan a brand new computer, the kind I could never dream of affording, because he needs the right tools to grow. I don't think parents know how loud silence can feel, or how painful indifference can be. By the time I hit high school graduation, I had learned to live with the ache. I'd tell myself, "It's fine, you're fine, be proud quietly." And I did. I learned to celebrate alone. But the thing about childhood wounds is that they don't disappear just because you pretend they're not there. They wait, they linger, they grow up with you. And when I stood at my studio opening and saw their text telling me yet again that I wasn't the priority, all those years of ignored wins and unseen effort slammed back into me like a wave I'd never truly escaped. You can only swallow the hurt for so long before it demands to be heard. By the time I reached high school, the favoritism in our house wasn't subtle anymore. It was loud, blinding, unavoidable. Everyone could see it. Teachers, neighbors, even extended family during Thanksgiving dinners. But the only people who pretended nothing was wrong were the ones causing it. My parents didn't just support Ethan, they invested in him. Thousands of dollars for architecture camps in Boston, personal tutoring sessions with a retired engineer Dad admired, specialty materials shipped from overseas for his projects. Every time he breathed near a blueprint, it was a celebration. Meanwhile, I tried to keep up with secondhand supplies, thrifted decor pieces, and scraps I begged for from neighbors who were remodeling their kitchens. One spring afternoon during junior year, I remember standing in the kitchen while my mom flipped through envelopes from the mail. I'd been waiting all week for one envelope in particular, a flyer from a weekend interior design workshop held at a local art school. It cost $150, which might as well have been $1,000 to me, but I was hopeful. When the flyer finally arrived, I handed it to her with a shaky smile. "Mom, I really want to take this workshop. It could help me build my portfolio." She skimmed the page for maybe 3 seconds, shrugged, and said, "Maya, we can't afford every little hobby you want to try. Maybe look for something less expensive." Less expensive. Hobby. Like designing spaces, the thing that lit me up inside, was a phase I'd outgrow. I nodded, trying to swallow the sting. Exactly a week later, Dad came home carrying a giant box. Inside was a brand new, top-of-the-line computer preloaded with architectural modeling software. "For Ethan's upcoming project," Dad said proudly. That computer cost more than anything I had owned in my entire life. I remember standing at the bottom of the stairs, watching Ethan unpack it while my heart did that thing where it tightens so much you swear something is tearing. He caught my eye and said, almost apologetically, "You know how they are." And the truth was, I did. Everyone did. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less. I tried reaching out to Ethan anyway. I didn't want to resent him. None of this was technically his fault. One evening, while he was sketching something for his competition, I walked into his room with a folder of mock room designs I'd been working on. "Hey," I said quietly, "can I get your opinion on something?" He glanced up, opened the folder, and flipped through 2 pages before closing it. "It's fine, but I'm kind of busy right now. Maybe later." Later never came. That was the moment I realized even Ethan, the person who should have understood what it felt like to want support, couldn't see me either. Or maybe he was too used to being the center to ever notice someone else trying to stand in the light. The final push, the moment the anger finally overpowered the sadness, happened during senior year. I had been selected to help design and decorate the stage for our school's prom, a huge honor for someone my age. I poured everything into it. Weeks of work, hundreds of sketches, late nights cutting fabric and building props in the art room. The reveal night arrived. The stage glowed under soft lights filled with everything I had envisioned. People whispered, "Wow," and "This is beautiful," as they walked in. Teachers hugged me, my classmates cheered. But my parents' seats stayed empty. Again, they had driven 2 hours away to attend Ethan's Regional Architecture Awards ceremony. He didn't win first place, didn't win second. He walked away with an honorable mention. And still, it was the biggest story in our house that week. Not one of them bothered to ask about the prom stage. They didn't even notice the photos I posted online. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't hide in my room. I didn't apologize for being hurt. I felt something sharper, something that didn't fade as quickly as sadness. I felt anger. Anger that my efforts were invisible. Anger that I was treated like an accessory in my own family. Anger that I kept trying to earn love from people who never even looked up long enough to notice I was bleeding for it. And that anger, quiet, steady, simmering, started to change me. For the first time, I stopped asking myself, what's wrong with me? And started asking, what if the problem was never me at all? When I finally left home for Savannah College of Art and Design, I thought distance would soften the ache. I told myself that college would be a clean slate, that once I was out of Augusta, the weight of being the forgotten child would fade with the city skyline. And in some ways, it did. But pain doesn't disappear just because you change your address. SCAD was everything I had dreamed of. Old brick buildings, buzzing studios, long nights filled with the smell of paint and sawdust. Everyone around me seemed to glow with creativity. I felt like I was finally somewhere I belonged, somewhere design wasn't a cute hobby, but a real future. But belonging comes with a price when you're carrying wounds no one else can see. My parents didn't contribute a single dollar to my tuition. Not one. Everything, loans, part-time jobs, secondhand books, I handled alone. My freshman year's schedule was brutal. Morning classes, afternoon shifts shelving books at the campus library, weekend gigs staging rental homes for a local realtor, and late-night assignments that blurred into morning. I barely slept, but I told myself the exhaustion was worth it, that someday my parents would notice how hard I was working and finally say the words I'd been craving since childhood. "We're proud of you." They never did. During my second semester, I earned a spot in a small showcase. It wasn't grand, just a student-run exhibit inside a converted warehouse. We were told to invite the people who mattered. After hesitating, rewriting, deleting, and rewriting again, I finally sent my parents a text. "I'm being featured in a design exhibit this Friday. It would mean a lot if you could come." I didn't get a response for 2 days. When it came, it read, "We're already committed. Ethan's competing in a national architecture challenge in Chicago. Maybe next time." Maybe next time. Their favorite phrase. The night of the exhibit, I stood inside the warehouse, surrounded by sculptures, renderings, mood boards, and bright overhead lights that made everything look a little harsher. My display was simple, a series of room redesigns with 3D models and sketches. My professor said my eye for space was instinctive, rare. People came. They asked questions. They smiled. But the only faces I kept searching for were the ones that never walked through the door. At the end of the night, when the crowd thinned and someone turned off half the lights, I sat on an old wooden crate, staring at the empty doorway. That was the first time I let myself break. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly. Tears slipping down my cheeks, the kind you wipe away before they even fall completely. It wasn't just sadness, it was the sharp, suffocating understanding that I could set the whole world on fire with my talent, and my parents would still be miles away watching Ethan hold a sparkler. I came close to quitting that night. I remember walking back to my dorm in the cold Savannah wind slicing across my face, whispering to myself, "Why am I doing this? Who is this for?" It definitely wasn't for my parents anymore, but I wasn't sure it was for me either. The next morning, I dragged myself to class, eyes swollen, hope drained. And that's when Chloe Parker, a girl who would become my best friend, slid into the seat beside me and said, softly, "You okay? You don't look like you slept at all." I wasn't okay, but I didn't know how to tell her that the thing hurting wasn't last night, it was every night before it. Later that week, still shaken, I met with the campus counselor, Dr. Hannah Rivera. She listened, really listened, in a way I wasn't used to. "You've been chasing their approval your entire life, but you're allowed to stop running." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to put the burden down. But letting go of hope feels a lot like losing something you'd been holding on to for so long it fused with your ribs. That semester taught me something I wasn't ready to face yet. You can do everything right, and the people you love most can still choose not to see you. And that kind of realization doesn't just hurt, it reshapes you. Rock bottom doesn't announce itself. It just arrives one morning when you stare at the mirror and don't recognize the person looking back. Tired eyes, tight jaw, hope wrung out like a washcloth that's been twisted too many times. For me, that breaking point quietly became a beginning. After that night at the student showcase, when I'd sat alone in the dim warehouse and cried until my chest hurt, something inside me shifted. Not all at once, more like a slow exhale after years of holding my breath. I realized that waiting for my parents' approval was like planting seeds in concrete. Nothing was going to grow there. So I started planting elsewhere. The first person who pulled me forward was Chloe. If you've never had a friend who sees the best in you before you even know it's there, find yourself a Chloe Parker. She dragged me to coffee shops when I wouldn't leave my dorm, shoved her phone at me with pictures of interior trends she thought I'd love, and said things like, "You're not invisible. You just grew up around people who didn't know how to look." One night during sophomore year, she brought me to an open house industry mixer hosted by a local interior design firm. I didn't want to go. I had a migraine. My heart felt heavy. My insecurities felt louder than my confidence. But she practically shoved me into an Uber. That night changed everything. The firm's owner, Jordan Hale, a sharp, warm woman in her 40s with silver streaks in her hair, walked up to a display I'd contributed to, a small space arrangement for a student collaboration. She studied it quietly, then turned to me and said, "Whoever did this has a natural instinct most designers spend years trying to learn." I swear, my lungs forgot how to function. When I told her it was mine, she smiled like she already knew. 2 months later, she offered me a part-time assistant job at her boutique design studio. It was the first time an adult, someone who wasn't grading me or related to me, called my work meaningful. Working with Jordan was like stepping into warm sunlight after years of standing in the shade. She taught me how to pitch ideas, how to talk to clients, how to make a room feel like a story instead of four walls. And she said something during a late-night project session that I will never forget. "Maya, the people who overlook you are missing out, not the other way around." Somewhere between her mentorship, Chloe's fierce loyalty, and the slow but steady self-growth encouraged by Dr. Rivera, I began to see myself differently. And then there was Jason. We met when he hired Jordan's firm to redesign a small cafe he was opening near River Street. He was warm, steady, disarming in a way that made me feel safe without trying. He asked about my ideas, my process, my sketches, and listened like my words mattered. One afternoon, as we walked through the half-finished cafe, he said, "You talk about design the way some people talk about the person they love. I think you're meant for this." No one had ever said something like that to me, not with that kind of belief behind it. By senior year, with Jordan's mentorship, Chloe's fierce loyalty, and Jason's grounded kindness, I began imagining something bigger. My own studio, a place that felt like mine, where every corner held a piece of my story, a place where I didn't have to shrink or apologize. Jordan encouraged it, Chloe designed my first logo mock-up, and Jason helped me scout affordable spaces. I wasn't building alone anymore, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't building to prove anything to my parents. I was building because I finally believed in me. When I signed the lease for a small storefront space in Savannah and saw my name on the dotted line, something inside me came alive. Not the version of me who begged to be chosen, not the girl waiting in the audience for parents who never showed, but the woman who knew her worth, even if her family never did. A week after my studio's opening, After the crowd, after the photos, after the laughter that almost made me forget the sting of my parents' absence, the door chimed softly and my mother walked in, not with pride, not with warmth, but with irritation carved across her face like it had been rehearsed. I was rearranging fabric samples when she snapped, "You've been ignoring our messages, Maya. That's childish." Childish. Of all the words she could have chosen, that one sliced the deepest. I turned slowly, letting the silence settle between us like dust. She stood there in her crisp blazer, arms folded, eyes scanning my studio like she was evaluating clutter. "You know we couldn't make it," she continued. "Ethan needed us in New York. His presentation was extremely important. You overreacted." Overreacted. I felt something inside me, something quiet and exhausted, finally shift. Not break, not shatter, just shift. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I didn't bite my tongue. I didn't tell myself, maybe she didn't mean it that way. I took a breath and met her eyes. "Mom," I said calmly, "you've missed everything. My showcases, my presentations, my awards, my milestones, everything." She blinked, thrown off by my tone. "You missed my art contest when I was 9 because you took Ethan to his camp. You missed my library project reveal because you drove him to robotics. You didn't come to prom night, not because you couldn't, but because you didn't think it mattered." "That's not fair," she began. "And when I begged for help with a $150 workshop, you told me design was a hobby, then bought Ethan a $1,000 computer in the same week." Her mouth tightened. "You're exaggerating." "No, I'm remembering." Something trembled in her jawline. Annoyance, not guilt. "You're being dramatic, Maya. We supported you too." "Mom," I said softly, painfully honest, "you've supported the idea of me, not the reality of me." Her face hardened instantly. "You'll regret speaking to me this way." And then came the sentence, the one I didn't plan, but the one that I had carried inside me for decades. "I'm done begging you to see me." It was quiet, steady, true. Her eyes narrowed. "So what? You're cutting us off?" I nodded. "For my peace? Yes." She inhaled sharply, spun around, and walked out like her heels might crack the sidewalk. The door closed behind her with a finality I felt in my bones. I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I didn't chase after her. I just breathed. Deeply. Freely. Like someone had finally opened a window in a room I'd been suffocating in for years. But the real twist came an hour later. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. For a moment, I expected anger, or dismissal, or another variation of, "You misunderstood." Instead, it read, "I heard what happened. I'm sorry." 2 words I had never expected to read from him. He kept typing. "Mom and Dad, they don't see what they do to people. They put so much pressure on me I can barely breathe. I'm tired of being their trophy. I'm tired of feeling like I'm only worth what I produce." I sat down slowly. He continued, "I saw pictures of your studio. It's amazing, Maya. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I never showed it." A warmth spread through my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. For the first time, we weren't rivals in a game neither of us asked to play. We were 2 kids who had been shaped, twisted even, by the same expectations, just in different directions. In that moment, it hit me. My parents didn't just lose me, they were losing Ethan too. And that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I put the phone down, stepped back into my studio, and took in the soft lights, the warm colors, the quiet hum of the space that I had built from scratch. For the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar but powerful. Victory, not over them, but over the version of myself who thought I needed them to be whole. A year after that moment, after the door closed behind my mother, after the message from Ethan, after the dust finally settled, I found myself standing in the center of my studio again. But this time, the space felt different. Not because of the decor, though I had switched out a few pieces. Not because of the customers, though business was better than I had dared to hope. Not because of the accolades, the features in small local magazines, or the growing clientele. No, the studio felt different because I was different. I wasn't the girl waiting at the window for parents who never showed up. I wasn't the young woman bending herself in half for scraps of attention. I wasn't the daughter trying to earn love the way someone earns a paycheck. I was a woman who understood her worth and who finally treated herself like she deserved to take up space. Over the months, Ethan and I stayed in touch, cautiously, gently, like we were both learning a new language neither of us had grown up speaking: honesty. He started therapy, he moved out of our parents' house, he began telling me things he had never admitted to anyone. How exhausted he was from being placed on a pedestal, how lonely the pressure felt, how much he envied my freedom to build a life on my own terms. It didn't erase the past, but it softened some of the sharper edges. As for my parents, they tried reaching out, occasionally, a voicemail here, a short message there, but the words felt thin, distant, more about restoring their comfort than repairing our relationship. I replied politely, but with boundaries. Thick ones. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes healing is choosing distance so you can breathe. Therapy taught me that. So did time. So did the small, steady triumphs of choosing myself again and again. And now, when I unlock the studio each morning and the sunlight spills across the floorboards, I whisper a quiet truth I wish someone had told me at 16. Your worth is not measured by who shows up for you. It's measured by who you become despite who didn't. If you've ever felt unseen in your own family, if you've ever been the child who blended into the background while someone else took center stage, you're not alone, and you're not broken. Tell me in the comments, when did you realize you deserved better? Hit like, subscribe, and share your story, not because algorithms matter, but because someone out there might need to hear that it's okay to choose themselves too, and that sometimes the family you build is more healing than the one you came from.